You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Hi, my name is Dr. Teodros Avery. I'm the professor of jazz studies here at Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. Today is the 12th session of the class entitled Key Movements, the Age of Jazz. Self-preservation. What does that mean? The protection of oneself from harm or death, especially regarded as a basic instinct in human beings and animals. A little later, we'll examine this very same characteristic which Zora Neale Hurston wrote into the main character, Janie Mae Crawford, in the book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Zora Neale Hurston was born on January 7th, 1891 in Nostasulga, Alabama. She created several acclaimed works of fiction, including the novel Their Eyes Were Watching God. She was also an outstanding folklorist and anthropologist, chronicling various cultures, including those of the Black American South and also in the Caribbean. Hurston was the daughter of two former slaves. Her father, John Hurston, was a pastor, and he moved the family to Florida when Hurston was very young. Following the death of her mother, Lucy Ann Potts Hurston, in 1904, and her father's subsequent remarriage, Hurston lived with an assortment of family members for the next few years. To support herself and finance her efforts to get an education, Hurston worked a variety of jobs, including as a maid for an actress in a touring Gilbert and Sullivan group. In 1920, Hurston earned an associate degree from Howard University in Washington, D.C. She published one of her earliest works in the university's newspaper. A few years later, she moved to New York City's Harlem neighborhood, where she became a fixture in the area's thriving art scene. Zora Neale Hurston is one of the leaders of the Harlem Renaissance. Living in Harlem in the 1920s, Hurston befriended the likes of Langston Hughes and Countee Cullen, among several other artists. Her apartment was a popular spot for social gatherings. Around this time, Hurston experienced a few early literary successes, including placing in short story and playwriting contests in the magazine called Opportunity. She landed a scholarship to Barnard College, where she pursued the subject of anthropology and studied with Franz Boas. She also worked with Langston Hughes on a play called Mulebone, a comedy of Negro life. One of her big accomplishments was receiving the Guggenheim Fellowship. This allowed her to work on what would become her most famous work, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Here's the original cover for the book that she wrote, Their Eyes Were Watching God, right there. There are some very unique themes in this book. Number one, there's love and love scenes between the protagonist, Janie Mae Crawford, and a black man, actually 3 different black men during the 1930s. Now, this is a picture from the movie here. I had you all watch the movie because I wanted you to have a modern day reenactment of the book. And that's Halle Berry on the left and a young actor on the right. Now, when we look at this movie, we have to remember, as we see that the characters are black men who are presented in a certain way, as hard workers, as leaders in the community. We have to remember that most media images of black men during this time were not like that. That most of the images had, number one, you had black men being portrayed, or rather mimicked, in blackface by non-blacks. So that right there lets you know where people thought, or how they thought about black men in general in society, that they were a joke to many people. And so with this book, what you have is Zora Neale Hurston is moving against a lot of that, in that the characters are real men. They're presented, as I said, one of the husbands, one of the men she was involved with was a husband who became and was a leader in building a town in Florida. And he was a very successful business thinking man. And they existed during that time, but I'm talking about how most black men were portrayed in the media. It wasn't in a positive light. So she presented him, in that way, and we have to applaud her for that, because like I said, prior to this time, and as you saw in some of the documentaries that I've shown up to this point, black men in terms of leadership or black men who had self-respect, who carried themselves a certain way, they were not put up front. They were put in the back, and black women were put up front. So she really changed a lot of that by having these types of black men in relationships with her. So she really challenged the status quo of what black love was about during that time. Up until this point, there really wasn't much talk of that. There weren't really that many role models that people could look to and say, I want to be in love like this black couple or that black couple. That it just wasn't really talked about and wasn't presented. So she stepped up. She said, you know what? I'm going to feature relationships with black men as a black woman. That was unique for the time. And then we'll go to the next photo. There's another one of the characters that she was involved with. That was the man who became the mayor of a town that she was brought to by him, and he helped create this thriving community there in Florida. And then next scene. Yes. Okay, so that was the last man that she was involved with and that she loved, and who helped her break out from the box that she was living in, her mind, body, and soul. Up to this point, most of the men that she was involved with didn't really seek out or help her seek out who she was as a young woman, as a young black woman. And that this guy right here, T-Cake, he was one of the men who didn't put her down for being a little older. who wanted her to be happy with who she was. So that was a triumph for her, because up to that point, even though she was in positive relationships, she was not respected and she was not encouraged to show who she was on a deeper level, right? Like a lot of women from this time, they were married often, but they were often looked at as being some sort of property. So this was the first man out of the three men who did not look at her like that. The second gentleman, the guy who helped build the city, he was better than the first. The first man, he really was an older guy who really was like, you know, he had 60 acres of land and he was just like, be happy, you know, I chose you. And it was somewhat of a fixed marriage too. But the second gentleman, he did love her, but after he began to be successful, he did not allow her to be who she was as she evolved with him side by side. So that became a stress point for her. And then finally, when she got to the last gentleman, he helped her bloom like a flower. She was able to be who she wanted to be, express herself, and live out her wild side that she had not lived out. So that was another thing to check out. Now, go to the next photo. Okay, yeah. Now, Hurston was a very witty, comedic writer, and she used comedy to entice you as a reader and to show you how ridiculous some of these men were for trying to suppress Janie Mae Crawford's free spirit. So there are moments in the movie when you're watching and she's purposely trying to make you laugh about something that someone said, or even by their actions in the movie and how they are relating to her. One thing is for sure is that her character, Janie Mae, is way ahead of all these guys. That the guys think they know what's going on, but she's ahead of the game. You know what I mean? So Zora Neale Hurston did that on purpose. She created this character, and to me, she seems like an extension of Zora, because after researching Zora Neale Hurston, I could see that she was very smart, very witty, and outspoken, and had a quick tongue, and her character was the same way. Okay, so now we're going to look at a short documentary. We're going to hear words from Alice Walker, the writer and educator, and also from Henry Louis Gates, who now is at Harvard University. And so these people are going to tell you how they felt about the book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Here we go.
In 1936, Zora won a Guggenheim grant to go to Haiti to research a book on voodoo, leaving behind a relationship with a much younger man. The failed affair inspired her most famous novel.
I wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God in Haiti. It was dammed up in me, and I wrote it under internal pressure in 7 weeks. The force from somewhere in space, which commands you to write in the first place, gives you no choice. You take up a pen when you are told and write what is commanded. There is no agony like bearing an untold story inside of you.
Their Eyes Were Watching God is a story of Janie Crawford discovering herself through her relationships with 3 very different men. Logan Killicks, her first husband, her second husband, Jody Starks, and then her third husband, Tea-Cake, who really encourages her to accept and love herself as she is.
A friend of mine gave me a copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God, and I read it in a sitting and absolutely loved it.
It's a novel that can be laugh out loud funny, and Hurston is a very gifted comic writer. And for some readers, it's a love story. And that's a very unusual thing in the African-American tradition. So in 1937, we don't have many love stories.
But there's another way to read it, which is it's a novel about the capacity of the African-American vernacular to narrate a novel, to tell a story.
You start reading it and you think you won't be able to understand it. And then you realize that you understand it perfectly. And that not only that, it's very funny. And so it gives you the pleasure of learning a new skill in a way.
The monstropolis beast had left his bed. The 200 miles an hour wind had loosed his chains. The sea was walking the earth with a heavy heel. The lake is coming, Tea Cake gasped. It's coming behind us, Janie shouted. Us can't fly, but we still can run, Tea Cake shouted. And they ran. The gushing water ran faster.
That uses a literary device, a well-known literary device called free indirect discourse. When the voice of the narrator and the voice of a character merge into a third voice, the narrator becomes educated by the black vernacular characters.
Joe Starks was the name. Been working for white folks all his life. When he heard all about him making a town all out of colored folks, he'd know that was the place he wanted to be. He'd always wanted to be a big boss. But the white folks had all to say so. That was right too. The man that built things ought to boss it. Let colored folks build things if they wants to crow over something.
That novel will continue to be read as one of the most sophisticated uses of free and direct discourse, which after all Flaubert used, and Henry James and Virginia Woolf and 1,001 other people. But none ever did it in a collective way, to capture the collective voice of an entire community in the way that Zora Neale Hurston did. Zora Neale Hurston established herself as a genius with that accomplishment alone.
So he talks about, that was Henry Louis Gates, the writer and educator. And so he talks about the black vernacular. And this is important because this is the time in which, of course, the Harlem Renaissance, and you have blacks who had come from down south up to the north. And with that migration, they brought their cultures from the south. And so he was saying, Henry Louis Gates was saying that Zora Neale Hurston was the first author to include the vernacular, the speech, the way black people spoke to each other. And up to that point, no one really included that in their writings. So she would speak as black people speak together, you know, using slang, using certain pronunciation of words, and she included that in her writings. And that was a very important moment because she was stepping out and saying, hey, you know, we can speak like we speak when we're amongst each other, and include that in, you know, our writings, in our poetry, in our books, and even in our music. And soon that caught on, and there were other people who were listening to the music and they were reading the words who were not necessarily African American, and they also were being influenced by the black vernacular. So that's a very important point that he made up, and he expresses how that was in and of itself one of her most important contributions to writing and to being a black writer. So that's very important, something you want to note as you're studying and reading. Now, one of the things that, we're going to move to the movie now, one of the things that the director Darnell Martin did was really let the characters become romantic characters. He also let Halle Berry's character, Jeannie Mae, be just as expressive in this relationship as her main love interest, Tea Cake, was. You know, he allowed her to really to show her love for him and her attraction for him, and that was something that was different because, like I said earlier, black people weren't looked at as romantic beings during the time that this book was written, and they just weren't really included in that conversation. So she stepped outside and said, you know what, I'm going to have this love interest, especially with that character, with Tea Cake, where it was more an even 50-50 type of love relationship. Where with the other ones, the other two men, it wasn't a 50-50 situation. But TK was the one who broke her out of that box that she was living in when she was married to the two other people. Now we're going to look at a clip from the movie, and it's going to feature one of these moments where you see them as romantic human beings. Let's take a look at that now.
Reckon you wish you never left the big house and still play these stones or something.
This ain't nothing. It ain't. Just was my man in the middle of a storm, that's all.
Supposing we was done.
It don't matter. These folks don't die till their time come nowhere. It's like you can see the light of day. You really don't care if you die before dusk. I was fumbling around in the dark. Got open the door, and there you was.
I never knew you were so satisfied with me like that.
So you see the romance and the intimacy between those two characters. Something I noticed, you noticed the candle was leaning on its side, but she never dropped it. Anyways, that was just something I noticed. Yeah, but there was a real, really nice synergy between the two characters and the way they talked to each other, the way they held each other, kissed each other. Those are all important achievements in the representation of blacks in literature. Very, very important moment right there, that you see a black woman and a black man being able to relate to each other in that very natural way that men and women relate to each other, in a very loving way. So something to note. One thing that she also had to deal with, not only did she have to deal with abusive men, but she also had an abusive grandmother who was forcing her to be traditional, trying to lock her in a box as well. And her grandmother wanted her to marry for money and stability, and not necessarily for who she was. So there was that stress point that she was fighting against as well. And you're going to see in this next scene, you're going to see the stress that she's receiving, not only from men, but also from an older woman who doesn't want to allow her to be a free thinking and flowing woman. So here we go. Check this out.
You see, I ain't never known my papa or my mom. My grandmama raised me. I was born sort of knowing things, like how the trees and the wind talk. I told the seeds when they was falling, I sure hope y'all fall on soft ground. That year, something about me was different. It's like my life was starting right at that moment. Hey, Jane Taylor!
Doing, Jane?
I'm all right.
How long you been letting Johnny Taylor kiss on you? What is wrong with you?
Ain't nothing wrong with me, Nanny. We was
I see what you was just doing. You just letting that trashy boy, that breathing bitches, wipe his feet on you.
So what do
feet on me.
You know, the woman is the mule of the world.
I ain't mean no harm, Nanny.
You don't even know what harm is, girl. Yeah, you're gonna get married right away.
To Johnny Taylor?
No, child. I wanted you to school out, but that ain't your idea, I see.
Well, I ain't ready to get married.
Oh, so you don't want to marry off decent like, huh? You want to be like your mama was. You want to run wild, break my heart. Someone good and decent's been asking after you for a while now. Brother Logan Killix.
Logan Killix? That's what he been hanging around here for? He looked like some old skull head in a graveyard.
Brother Killix got 60 acres, and he's good and decent.
I don't care what he got.
Nanny took the horizon and pinched it into a little bit of a thing.
Now, y'all want to make sure his dinner's always hot when he comes home. And the floor swept clean in the morning. And be welcoming to him. Here he comes.
So you see how the grandma is putting pressure on her to be traditional, to live a life that maybe the grandma wished she had lived. And you see that Janie Mae is starting to bloom into her own woman. She's starting to discover herself, her sensual side, and she's starting to become attracted to men. And her grandma's right there, stopping it at every corner, unless he has money and can provide a certain lifestyle for her. And Janie doesn't want her in her business. She wants to be able to discover who she is, discover herself. And that's an unfortunate thing that she's dealing with. Also, I showed you the love scene between her and Tea-Cake. Tea-Cake was the man who really made her feel good as a woman. Well, this man that her grandma is setting her up with, he's one of the men who, you know, he did very well for himself. He owned 60 acres of land. He had a farm. You know, what more could you want, right? But he had it all. And Janie still was not excited. He was an old man. He was older than her. And he did not excite her on any levels. He wasn't interested in her own needs, her own interests, nothing like that. He just basically needed somebody to assist him, not only to be a wife, but just to assist him on his farm as well. So you're gonna see one of the, I would say, the bad love scenes between he and her. And just watch this and you'll see how she's just not excited about him. She doesn't feel like he cares about who she is on the inside. And you're gonna see it right now. Check this out.
Dinner's always hot when he comes home. And the floor swept clean in the morning. And be welcoming to him. Here he comes. Dry your eyes.
I do. Miss Janie.
We got married, just like Nanny wanted. It was true. Logan was good and decent. I was a proper married woman. But I was still waiting for love to begin.
Come on, now.
Oh, I woke up this morning, I looked around in the room. Oh, when I woke up this morning, I looked around in my room. Hello, blue, now what you doing here so soon? I know it was the blue, 'cause I heard him walking in my room. I know it was the blue, 'cause I heard him walking in my room. Lord, I wonder what's the matter, that the blue just won't leave me alone. Oh, blue, blue, why'd you let poor me be? Oh, blue, why'd you let poor me be? And let me have one day out of the 7 days a week.
Connie, get us another flower.
Can I go with you?
You better stay here. Help me out some. That porch needs cleaning. Cut up them seed potatoes. Don't spend all day drinking. Slaughter that runt. Bleed him good. I want chops for dinner.
So that's a no?
Oh!
Take it back. Yeah, so there you have it. He was not interested in her beyond those needs that he just laid out in that closing scene. So this is a very depressing life for Janie Mae, and made her want to leave that situation. And so this is the struggle between freedom and not being free. You know, free in terms of how she carried herself, how she was a free spirit, and how she chose her love interests, and being with someone who was not really interested in even loving her physically or spiritually. So that was unfortunate for her. And Zora Neale Hurston does a great job of showing that stress point for the main character, for the protagonist. One thing I mentioned a little bit earlier is the ability or the way that Zora Neale Hurston allowed the characters, the black males, to be leaders. I don't know if you remember this, but when we were talking about Bessie Smith and the different female blues singers, there was one of the gentlemen who spoke, and he said that at that time, during the vaudeville shows and everything, that the black men were not allowed to be seen unless they were in blackface or they made a joke of themselves. And so with these characters, she was moving away from that. They were allowed to be leaders. They were allowed to be responsible characters. And then, we must remember Red Summer, in which a lot of these communities that sprung up, these black communities, because it was a segregated society, a lot of them were met with resistance and theft of their property. And many of the communities during Red Summer were pillaged and burnt to the ground. So with that as the backdrop, let's look at how these characters in the movie were allowed to prosper, to be leaders, and to lead their community. That's very important. In particular, Janie Mae's second husband, Joe Starks, was a successful businessman, and he became the mayor of their town in Eatonville, Florida. So let's take a look at that.
He needs to buy more land, ain't I?
Oh, now what? Joe pulling out his money.
He gonna buy more land, I told y'all.
Captain Eaton signing the paper? day when y'all voted Joe to be the mayor, wasn't nobody more proud of him than me. He just strolled around, all wrapped up in his new dignity, thinking, planning our future. And I was right there with him, ready to help. Some folks need thrones and ruling chairs to make their influence felt. But not Joe. He had a throne in the seat of his pants. When the new families came, the land we bought made us a good profit. And we reinvested the money back into Eatonville. Can't neither one of us play it.
This ain't for playing. It's just for looking at.
Shoot, Jody. This is the life Nanny always dreamed of me having.
We did it.
She'd be so happy.
Are you happy?
Yeah.
Sure, and I just ain't got the figure I used to.
Oh, you know you look like a young gal in that dress.
Sam says the mayor of Orlando's coming. Oh, and someone from the governor's office, too.
Oh. Well, you know what that means, ladies.
What?
We in a big house now! It's pretty. You think Joe gonna like it?
Of course he'll like it. Janie, you and Joe changed everything. Just feels like anything's possible now.
About what time? 5?
Lord, I'd run over the mayor.
Almost, Phoebe. Almost. I ordered it from the finest ladies' store in Orlando.
Oh. Must have cost a lot. Look at this one, Tony. This is the one the ladies made for me. Ain't it pretty?
Yeah, but it ain't befitting of a mayor's wife. You're the bell cow. Those other women, they're your gang. No other wife. None of them should rank with you. I'm gonna show you the world. Remember?
As you might, Frank Taylor can't see me patrol that white bed.
Now, if she's my wife, I'd kill her cemetery dead.
Come on now.
Come here, boy.
So you get to see in this in these clips that I just showed you, you get to see how the second husband, Joe Starks, how he really brought that town from being, you know, kind of a rural community. I mean, it still was rural in a way, but it was pretty advanced from where it came from. And you notice how his character was a hard worker. He was a leader. He loved his wife. He kept trying to be productive. And you could see all the people in the town, they admired him and looked up to him. And no one was trying to bring him down. He could get support not only from his wife, but also from the community to continue to be a leader as he was the mayor of the town. And apparently one of the people who owned a lot of land in the town, and he was able to sell plots of land. So she did a very, very good job of showing black males in a positive way. The worst it got was the first guy. I mean, he was just kind of like an absentee husband, but he wasn't really interested in her. But it wasn't, the characters were not abusive. They were not, you know, just, you know, treating Jannie Mae like she was subhuman or anything like that. So that was a great accomplishment coming from Zora Neale Hurston during this time where they were breaking away from old ways of thinking. That's what I always come back to as we talk about the music, we talk about poetry, and we're talking about this story, Their Eyes Were Watching God, that these artists in the Harlem Renaissance were really moving away from a certain type of thinking that was not prosperous, it was not upwardly bound, and it was, it did not have faith that they could orchestrate their lives in a certain way that went beyond what other people thought about them. That's very important, that we always want to realize that these artists, and including Zora Neale Hurston, were moving away from an old way of thinking. And as she showed with these male characters, she pushed them forward and they were able to shine as men in their communities. Now, she had her own struggles with them, but she still allowed them to be men, and that's very important. We're gonna look at one more, it's a short clip, but you're gonna see another example of how the black man is not looked at as being a criminal, a physical abuser or anything like that, but more as a positive mate. Okay, so check this out.
He just needs you to show him what to do.
Get a goddamn punch up.
slaves in no council. They need a leader, that's all. And look to me like Joe Starks. You're the perfect man for the job. Look at this face. Good looking enough to be on a silver dollar. This chest. Strong and broad. Bet you got a big speech-making voice in there, don't you? These hands. Lord knows these hands made for counting money.
I'm gonna buy 100 acres. And I'm gonna buy 100 more. And I sell the land we don't need to newcomers. I'm gonna put Eatonville right in the middle of the map. And with the money we make, I'm gonna buy you your very own train car, and we gonna crisscross this country first class. Call me Jody like you do sometimes. Call me Jody.
You ain't gonna buy nothing, I'm telling you, y'all talk.
I'm telling y'all we need to buy more land, ain't I?
All right, so you get to see the intimacy between Joe Starks and her husband and his wife. That's very important, as I said before, the intimacy between the two during these times in which they were not really portrayed like that in media. So we got to see that again. Now, one of the reasons why we receive such an authentic view of living down south in the story of Their Eyes Were Watching God is because of Hurston's work as an anthropologist. She worked for the WPA, or the Works Progress Administration. It was a program created by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR. It was the largest and most ambitious American New Deal agency. The New Deal is a program that he started to rebuild America. He employed millions, or the program employed millions of people, mostly unskilled men, but also women, as in this case, to carry out public works projects, including the construction of public buildings and roads. And so she was a recipient of this program. And so she would go out and she would do field work. So I'm going to show you one example of some of the work that she was doing through the WPA, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's program. Here we go. Check this out.
Zora Neale Hurston had already made her name as a writer in the Harlem Renaissance. In her critically acclaimed books and folklore research, she captured the rhythms of African American life and speech. By the mid-1930s, she had finished writing a novel. Their Eyes Were Watching God. But she was destitute and needed work like everyone else.
There is something about poverty that smells like death. Dead dreams dropping off the heart like leaves in a dry season.
Hurston had a confidence in her storytelling and the magic of stories from her childhood in Eatonville, the only Florida town founded by African Americans.
She was deep down inside an anthropologist, but she was the kind of anthropologist that did not stand aloof and make judgments. She wanted to be right there with the people, talking with them. And she also had a high regard for what they shared with her.
I just get in the crowd with the people, and if they're singing, and I listen as best I can, then I start to join in with a phrase or two, and then finally I get so I can sing a verse, and then I keep on till I learn all the sounds and all the verses, and then I sing them back to the people until they tell me that I can sing them just like them.
At the time, a black woman who called herself an author was scarcer than hen's teeth. Scarcer still was a black woman like Hurston being paid to write by the federal government.
So yeah, so that was a unique situation, but it was very, very beneficial to her as an artist, and she was able to go out and be paid to do work. You know, a lot of artists, sometimes they need situations of employment in between making great works of art that, you know, in the case of Langston Hughes, he was a writer that earned all of his income from his writing. But that, like I said, a few weeks ago, that was unique that he was able to do that. So this program, the WPA, really helped Zora Neale Hurston earn money and also be able to focus on her art. Now, as a person that was an anthropologist, she also created a short film that basically chronicled her work, her field work. And so, you know, that is the work, this field work is the work that really influenced the work that we see. Like when we get that, when we view the movie and it has a very Southern feel to it, but it's very authentic, how the characters are speaking and how they're relating to each other. And a lot of the isms, a lot of the mannerisms that they have is directly out of her Southern culture, but also her research and field work through observing the people, through singing songs with them, through observing the men and the women and how they relate to each other. And so she cataloged all that in this short film, and you're going to hear her voice, and she's going to be talking about the work that she did when she went out and researched. This is from 1928, so let's check this out, and you're going to get a real feel, a real authentic feel about the people and the time that she spent studying them, and then think in the back of your mind, oh, this is where she studied, this is what she studied, and helped us see her work as being a real authentic work. Let's check this out.
Zora Hurston speaking. In all the big work camps, sawmills and turpentine steel and road camps and whatnot, they have a man to go around and wake up the camp. And he has various chants and hollers to wake them up, and sometimes he makes them up as he goes along. Well, I heard these at Lochman, a big sawmill down in Polk County. Wake up, bullies, get on the rod. 10 quiet Davis, 5 o'clock. Come on that cover, bullies. Come on up on that cover, unless you want some trouble with the walker. Come on. Wake up, Jacob. Day is a breaking. Get your whole cake of bacon in your shirt tail shaking. Wake up, bullies. Who for the show? Big crowd game on the other side, and I know you wanna go. Wake up, bullies. Who for the show? Big crowd game on the other side, I know you wanna go. Hey, you riding mule skinners, you better learn how to skin. Captain got a new job and they need 100 men. This is a song called Tampa. I've known it ever since I could remember, so I don't know who taught it to me, but I heard it sung in my native village when I was a child. Not in front of the old folks, of course. Thought I heard somebody say, you nasty but you stinky but take it away. Oh, you nasty but you stinky but take it away. I do not want it in here. Oh, I'm so glad that the lawyers passed. The women in Tampa got to wash the ass. Oh, the women in Tampa got to wash the ass. Oh, do not want it in here. Oh, thought I heard somebody shout. Horse up the window, let the stink go out. Oh, horse up the window, let the stink go out. I do not want it in here. Oh, just I heard somebody say, nasty but stinky but take it away. Oh, nasty but stinky but take it away. I do not want it in here. This song I'm going to sing is a line and rhythm, And I'm going to call it Mule on the Mount, though you can start with any verse you want and give it a name. And it's the most widely distributed voice song in the United States. Captain got a mule, mule on the mount, call him Jerry. Captain got a mule, mule on the mount, call him Jerry. Gonna ride him down, Lord, Lord, ride him down. I got a woman, she shakes like jelly all over. I got a woman, she shakes like jelly all over. Her hips so broad, Lord, Lord, her hips so broad. My little woman, she had a baby this morning. My little woman, she had a baby this morning. He had blue eyes, Lord, Lord, he had blue eyes. Anna told her it must be the Hellfire Captain. Anna told her must be the Hellfire Captain. He had blue eyes, Lord, Lord, he had blue eyes. Don't you hear them? A cuckoo birds keep a-hollering. Don't you hear them? A cuckoo birds keep a-hollering. It looks like rain. Lord, Lord, it looks like rain. I got a rainbow wrapped and tied around my shoulder. I got a rainbow wrapped and tied around my shoulder. It looked like rain. Lord, Lord, it looked like rain. I had me down 2-3 cans of tomatoes. Oh, had me down 2-3 cans of tomatoes. A can of corn. Lord, Lord, a can of corn. I got a woman, she's pretty but she's too bulldozing. I got a woman, she's pretty but she's too bulldozing. She won't live long, Lord, Lord, she won't live long. You may leave and go to Halifax, but my slow drag will bring you back. Well, you may go, but this will bring you back. I've been in the country, but I moved to town. I'm a total shaker from my head on down. Well, you may go, but this will bring you back. Some folks call me a total shaker. It's a doggone lie. I'm a backbone breaker. Well, you may go, but this will bring you back. Oh, you like my features, but you don't like me. Don't you like my features? Don't you shake my tree? Oh, well, you may go, but this will bring you back. A hoodoo, a hoodoo, a hoodoo whacking. My heels all popping and my toenails cracking. Well, you may go, but this will bring you back.
So there you get to see that she had a real country perspective, a real rural perspective, not a city perspective. And you can imagine that she came from a community like that, and then she went to New York City, to Harlem, and began to write stories which also address some of the things that she saw in those communities here in the United States, in the southern United States, and also in Haiti and in Jamaica. But some of the scenes that we just witnessed are very, very similar to scenes in the movie that we saw. You get the feel like it's almost like they shot the film in the same area that she also filmed her film. So the director did a very good job of maintaining her perspective as a country woman and also someone who adores her country culture. She never antagonized her culture, being from the country, as so many people like to do. She never looked down upon her culture. She's very proud of it. She knew all the songs that she was taught. She sang them. You could tell she was very proud about it. She wasn't necessarily a singer, but she was loud and proud about knowing her heritage and her culture. And that she showed us through her writings, and especially through her novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I started out, in the beginning, I read you the definition to self-preservation. And I'll read that once again. Self-preservation, the protection of oneself from harm or death, especially regarded as a basic instinct in human beings and animals. A little later, we'll examine this very same characteristic with Zora Neale Hurston, with her character Janie Mae. Now, what you have is a situation where she worked away, she got away from her first husband. He didn't really care about her. She was more of a supportive character to his farm, and even more so, she had to be just as much a farmer as him. She wasn't interested in that. Then she meets the second character, Starks, Mr. Starks, and then she is whisked away from that life. And then she meets him, and she grows with him. He becomes the mayor, and she loves him. But then their love starts to wane a little bit as he becomes older and more successful at being a mayor. Then she meets Tea Cake. He doesn't have a business. He's not a mayor. He's kind of like a guy just kind of floating around. But he sees her inner beauty and encourages her to be herself as he was his self. And so what happens in the movie is that they stay out in the Everglades during a storm, during a hurricane. And so in the course of that, he gets bitten by a dog who, for some reason, is right by them during this hurricane. The dog has rabies. He contracts rabies. And then suddenly, Janie Mae is put into a very, very, very rough spot, very challenging position. Now the guy who has shown her the most love and who has really encouraged her to be who she is as a woman, and who has, shared sensual moments with her and grown with her, now has rabies, and there's no cure for rabies, apparently, or they couldn't get it to him. They couldn't get the medicine to him. So the doctor says, hey, if we don't get him out of here, he'll be basically attacking you and you'll get rabies. So she's faced with this conflict of having to, realizing that the person that has shown her the most love is now infected with the disease, and he could end up wanting to kill her. So she's torn. She went from a guy who wasn't interested in her, a husband, to another husband who was interested in her, but they grew apart. Then she runs into this young guy, and all of a sudden he's just whisking her off of her feet, but he gets bitten by a dog that has rabies. So she's in this really, really tough situation, and she has to ask herself, am I going to preserve myself? As I read you the definition of self-preservation. She's in a situation where she has to preserve herself. And this young man is not thinking in his right mind anymore. He has rabies, and he has a gun. So that is a complete paradox from where the story has been going, because you're thinking that, oh, she's got this, she worked out of oppression. She worked out of an oppressive situation with a man. Now she's got a new man. He's a mayor. She's doing all right, but then they grow apart. And then you think when she meets Tea Cake that she's off, that she's going to leave Florida and they're going to travel away to a new place and live a better life. And then he gets bitten and has rabies. So the question is, does she preserve herself, or does she let the story end with her being killed, basically. And she goes above and beyond and protects herself instead of, being killed by someone who can't think straight anymore. Now he's thinking like a ravenous dog that has rabies. And also there's more you can analyze there, that this guy who was, a fly-by-night character was bitten by a dog who was a little tougher than him. One thing I want you to think about is that struggle between her two sides, and then having to actually kill this man who would have killed her, basically. And so she preserved herself. So now I'm going to show you the scene where she's in this dilemma, where she's met the love of her life, but he's sick now, and he's a threat to her life. So let's check this out. This is the final scene.
Hey.
How about we have some lemonade?
How come you don't sleep with me no more?
I'll sleep with you. Come on, lay down. I'll sleep with you. See? Doc is gonna be here. Everything gonna be okay. Is that good?
Where you at?
No place.
You was gonna run off a motorboat, ain't you? Tell the truth, you tired of waiting on me. Do it for me. You gonna find yourself someone else, ain't you, huh? Huh? Don't lie to me!
It's just a sickness. That's all it is. It's just a sickness. Got a hold of your mind. And you just can't think straight. It's just a sickness. It's the sickness. It's just making you think crazy.
Don't touch me! I didn't see you with him!
Fight it. Fight. I know you can fight. Because if you don't fight it, they gonna tie you down. And I ain't gonna let nobody tie you down. Now put that gun. Can you see me? Tiki. You see me? You see me, don't you? Can you see me? You see me? You see me? It's Jamie. I know you love me.
Wow, pretty powerful scene. So she chose to preserve herself, smart woman. But that was the struggle that she had, and that was the struggle that Zora Neale Hurston set up in her book, and we got to see it played out in the movie. But so that was the story of Janie, and their eyes were watching God. So that concludes session 12. We want to thank you for listening, and we will see you next time, and I'll see everyone else online. All right, have a good day. See you later.